everyone from Ukraine. You're watching Channel 24. My name is Andrei Grozda, and our guest today is David Debatto. He is a retired U.S. military counterintelligence special agent. He served in Iraq as a head of the Tactical Intelligence Agency Group. David Debatto also served as an instructor for counterintelligence courses of the U.S. Army Reserve. He has 4 novels published by Grand Central and is currently finishing a memoir about his Iraq experience. David Debatto, our guest today, has also written articles for Vanity Fair, Celencom, The American Prospect, and the Washington Monthly. Glad to see you, happy to see you, and thank you for joining us today, Mr. Debatto.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I hope this whole my whole introduction was correct, and I didn't make any mistakes there.
No, very good. You even pronounced my name correctly, which is difficult.
It's really difficult, especially for a Ukrainian journalist. So let us start from today's news. Russians, their FSB service, they had shared their official scenario or version or a legend how the blast on Crimean bridge happened, actually, and they insist that it was Ukrainian secret servicemen who stood behind this incident, behind this explosion on a Crimean bridge. They say that Kirill Budanov, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence service, he was a head man, the main man who stands behind this. Some people are already arrested on Russian territory. What do you think about all this story that Russians just have shared?
Well, the first thing I do whenever I read any stories or information coming out of the Kremlin is to discount it. Pretty much it's the opposite. I'm not saying in this case that Ukrainian intelligence was not involved. In fact, I would be surprised if it wasn't. And I would also be surprised if they admitted this publicly. And the 8 individuals who they arrested in relation to the bridge may be related to the individuals that also blew up the bomb in the middle of Moscow and killed one of the chief propagandists there, the daughter of one of the propagandists.
I mean, Daria Dugina, yeah?
No, the same exact one. So maybe it's these same ghost people who seem to travel quite a bit. But no, to be honest and serious, personally, I don't have any inside information to Ukrainian intelligence, but I would not be surprised if they did not coordinate this, whether or not they were personally involved. Look, that was a spectacular and very successful operation. It dealt an incredible psychological blow to the Kremlin. And whether or not they repair it quickly is irrelevant at this point. It dealt a blow to the heart of Russian efforts and Putin specifically. So no, it was a brilliant operation, and yes, I believe that of course Ukrainian intelligence was in some ways involved in this, and congratulations to them.
Do you believe in this official version that it was a truck loaded by explosions that blasted just in the middle of a bridge and make all this harm and damage possible? Or there was another explosions loaded earlier, probably on the basics of the bridge, downside, under the bridge, or something else?
Yeah, well, I'm not an explosives expert, but I've had quite a bit of experience investigating them afterwards and working with explosive experts. My opinion, yes, there were multiple locations where the bridge was, how shall I say, armed with various types of explosives. This was a long-term long-planned operation, as any operation like this would be. So no, I don't believe that it was the damage was caused solely by the truck that we've all seen in those videos. The damage was just too inconsistent with that. The explosions, the resultant fire afterwards, and the damage to the bridge in the different locations indicated demolition charges placed in various locations.
Yeah, that sounds very realistically, but we have right now the official version, and we have some conspiracy theories that are like flying around in the air. And one of them is that it was some groups of influence in Russia, in Moscow. They are fighting among for influence in Kremlin. I mean, Ministry of Defense, FSB, other so-called Siloviki, the man from the military of Russian military, Kadyrov and other ones. Maybe one of those group organized this special operation on the bridge just to fight for a power, just to get some more power in Kremlin. Is it possible to believe in such a crazy conspiracy theory?
Sure, it's possible to believe in anything.
Yeah.
I discount it. First of all, I don't think the FSB would be capable of doing it at this point. I do believe that the SBU, the Ukrainian special services, would be capable of doing it. I believe they did do it, or at least coordinated it. Although there is a lot of infighting right now, of course, going on inside the Kremlin. But no, I don't believe they were responsible for this action.
Okay, how would you estimate the level of professionalism and of the job done by Ukrainian military intelligence service, by SBU, the secret security service of Ukraine, during this almost 8 months of full-scale war against Russia? Did your colleagues from Ukraine surprise you, or you just were already? Did you already know that they are on such a high level of professionalism right now?
It's a good question. I'm one of the many Americans, at least American intelligence and military veterans, that were not surprised by the performance of either the Ukrainian intelligence services or the Ukrainian military overall. We knew about not only their professionalism, but by their drive, their patriotism, and the fact that they would never give up, and that this was.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
There is a professionalism and drive on one hand, and there is a skills, experience, and the professionalism
absolutely.
on the other hand, and you can just avoid. You can just use your patriotism without the skills. Yeah.
Well, for one thing, since 2014, the initial invasion of Russia into Ukrainian territory, which is not talked about as much in America these days, but since that time, America and Western Europe, as you know, NATO forces have been training the Ukrainian intelligence services. And they have soaked it up like a sponge, as we say. They have been excellent students. Some of them have traveled to Europe and as well as to America, as well as being trained by advisors and trainers in Ukraine. The level of skill of the Ukrainians, specifically the intelligence services, counterintelligence services, offensive and defensive intelligence services, are outstanding. Far and away better than anything Russia could ever post, for a whole lot of different reasons, which we can talk about later if you'd like. But no, the level of professionalism and skill has been outstanding. Not surprising to me, but still outstanding.
Good. Let us talk a little bit about another incident. Probably it was also a special operation just committed and made in the Baltic Sea. I mean, the attacks on Russian pipelines, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. There were multiple explosions there in the Baltic Sea. And of course, Russia says that the opposite side stands behind it. The Western countries, I don't know, USA, Anglo-Saxons, as the Putin said in his speech. Actually, so he claims it was the Great Britain and the United States and their operation. Who actually stood behind this incident or accident, and who benefits from it?
It's Russia.
Okay.
I'm not obligated to toe any party line. I don't speak for the government, so I'll just tell you it was Russia, Russian forces. There's no question about that. Who would benefit by it? You can make an argument, if you wish, that the Western European countries, Great Britain, Germany, all of Western Europe could possibly benefit by it by trying to have them make peace negotiate with Russia and get their oil back and have a nice warm winter. That's a false argument, but you can make that. Who really benefits by it? Russia. They feel by doing this, they would force Europe into their hands. They would force the Europeans to negotiate a peace, as well as Ukraine, because they don't want to freeze this winter. Also, they are, Western Europe, on the verge of massive inflation and having severe economic problems. And Russia, of course, knows this, and this would be a very good way for them to force negotiations. And so, to anybody with any brain, really, that thinks about this or knows Russia at all, this was Russia. I can't prove that, but the forensic analysis is being done once the oil and gas stops being pumped, and they will prove that this was Russia.
How far can Putin go in this like way of intimidating Europe by such kind of explosions? Probably he will just hit another important objects, probably Ukrainian gas pipelines to cut off everything. What he still has in his pocket, actually? What kind of tools and instruments?
Well, short of the nuclear option, which everybody talks about, he has a lot of non-nuclear options you just mentioned. He can very well cut off every drop of oil and gasoline to Europe and Ukraine. That would make things exceedingly difficult. It would make some controversial times with the Western European countries as far as what would they do. He can and he will continue to attack Ukrainian energy sites, transmission sites, electrical sites, possibly the nuclear sites again. He can try to completely put Ukraine and Western Europe in a cold, dark winter, ruining their economies or trying to, and thus again forcing them to the negotiating table. He could try to blockade the Black Sea totally, although that would fail. His Black Sea fleet is nothing to shout about these days, but he could try. You're dealing with a wounded animal here. You're dealing with a man who, if he was rational at the beginning of this, is not rational today. So he could block the grain shipments out to the Middle East and Africa totally, or try to. So there's many things in his quiver, in his repertoire, short of a nuclear attack that he can do, which would make life very difficult for Europe and Ukraine.
Got it. On what stage of this war, actually, American government or President Biden's administration just started to believe that Ukrainian army, Ukrainian military actually can win this war? I guess they had a different vision from the very beginning of this massive Russian invasion in February and March. How did it started? How it started actually changing? What was the turning points that like changed everything?
Well, everything really started to change, at least in the United States, and I believe in Western Europe as well, with the defense of Kyiv. Believe it or not, and I'm embarrassed to say this, most in the West believed that Kyiv may fall within a week. I did not, I really didn't, and everybody I know and work with, my colleagues, did not believe this, but the vast majority of the West did, including our leadership. So the successful defense of Kyiv back in February and March started the turning point. That was a shocker for many people. It really started them thinking, maybe the Russian army isn't 3 meters tall and the second best army in the world. Maybe the Ukrainians are for real. Maybe we need to take a second look at this. And of course, with the defense and counter offensive in Kharkiv and eastern Ukraine, which started several weeks ago, that was the real turning point for which I believe there's no return. Meaning, I believe the West, including the United States, went all in. They actually did believe, and even the naysayers, the doomsayers believed, yes, this is going to happen. Ukraine will win. Russia will lose. It's just a matter of how fast and what the conditions will be in terms of when the war actually ends.
Well, but the defeat of Russia could cause very unexpected consequences. I mean, geopolitically and so on and everything. But and you know, the United States government and administration still keeps the status quo policy. Well, the Washington likes to control the processes, that everything will be under control of official governments in the world. And after possible defeat of Russia in Ukraine, a lot of unexpected processes can be started inside of Russia. I mean, collapse of the government of the state, some independence movements of native nations inside Russia could just emerge, and so on. Do actually special forces, government in the United States are interested that in Ukrainian victory in this war, and what would they do after it with Russia, with new Russia probably, because it just can cause a lot of problems there.
It's a great question, and one that I think the West has to ask and has to answer. If I could break it down quickly into two parts. Yeah. First of all, when Russia loses and Ukraine is victorious, there will be a modern day Marshall Plan. Which means the West, including the United States, possibly in the lead, will rebuild Ukraine better than it was before. They will take the time and the money to do this. Now, as far as Russia, what will happen? It depends who takes over. It depends what happens after Putin, and there will be a post-Putin period. If he loses, I don't think I'm telling you, the Ukrainians, anything new. He will not survive. No Russian leader has ever survived a Russian military defeat. He will not either. Who takes over after him is, of course, a good question. If it's a hardliner worse than him, that's a problem, not only for Russia, but for the West. What will he do? We don't know. If it's somebody comparable to Putin, just as bad but not worse, you had already mentioned it. I believe, many of us believe, that the independence movements among the many ethnicities that are currently in Russia that were conquered over the centuries may very well rise up again when they sense the instability in the Kremlin. And there will be instability if Russia loses this war. They will rise up, I believe. And what will we do? What will America do? What will the West do? Again, it depends on the severity of the uprising.
How well do you think American intelligence and American administration, President Biden's administration, how well are they informed about what is happening inside of Kremlin, in Putin's team? Who starts to change their minds, who are starting to oppose Putin, actually? Because some of the small portions of such informations are already somehow are now spreading in the media, in American media. But well, we believe that American intelligence are very professional, and it should have its own sources of information and agents of information everywhere, even in Moscow. How well are they informed? What do you think about this?
I think that what you're talking about is human intelligence, which is my background, essentially. It's very good. It's excellent, but with a caveat, meaning with a but. However, not as good as it used to be. Why? America has pulled back a lot of its resources on human intelligence in lieu of electronic intelligence, satellites, intercepts. But having said that, we still have many people in Moscow. And what's going on now, because there's so much jockeying for position, for power, post-Putin, some of his insiders that would be very reluctant to speak to Westerners, to Americans, are starting to think about their own futures. So yes, more human intelligence is coming out that than would have happened even 1 or 2 or 3 years ago. So we are getting some good actionable intelligence from some of his insiders. So what's being leaked to the press, of course, is not the majority of what we know. But even what's leaked to the press is come from some pretty good insiders that American intelligence does have in place.
Okay, so what do you think about the other geopolitical force, significant force. I mean, China. Is China on the Russian side right now, or they keeps try to keep some distance from Moscow and to just look what happens from this war, how it will end, and then make a decision how would they act in this conflict.
China is and always will be on China's side.
Yeah.
China is a convenient partner of Russia. When it's convenient, they're a Russian ally. When it's not, they're not a Russian ally. They're always in the middle. They have a look and see attitude. What happens to Russia is, of course, very important to China, but what happens to America and Europe is more important. Russia is not a huge trading partner with China. Western Europe is. So is the United States. The United States also, of course, does have strategic nuclear weapons, as does Russia. But the most important thing to the Chinese is not nuclear weapons. It's the economy, or as we say, it's the economy, stupid. They think about the world economy and what would happen if Russia did knock off the United States or Western Europe in this war. What would happen to China? Nothing good, nothing good. And if Russia did have the, how shall I say, stupidity to launch a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, the consequences for Russia would be catastrophic, as has been said, but it would also have incredible consequences for China economically. And in that situation, I can tell you, China would align itself with the West and against Russia. They are not stupid. They would not come to Russia's aid at that point. So Russia would be left with essentially no allies, significantly China.
So in this case, do Russia still have any allies in this conflict? Any reliant allies, strong allies? Iran, maybe someone else? North Korea?
Ha! Yeah, sure. They're already going to Iran and North Korea. I think you guys are shooting down the Ukrainian drones left and right. God bless you. So
A lot of those drones right now in our
absolutely, and you're re-engineering them and whatever else you need to do. As far as North Korea, look, he needs to get a new tailor. The man needs to know how to dress. He's not going to be sending off any real significant aid to North Korea. And look, when a country goes to North Korea for aid, it's on its knees. So no, they're not going to get any significant help from anyone. What cards do they have to play? They have a lot of non-nuclear conventional weapons left. Let's not fool anybody. They have large Soviet-era stocks left. Not unlimited, for sure, but they have enough to make life very miserable for Ukraine for, I would say, at least several weeks, if not longer. But they are coming to the end of that as well. And the supply chain is not going to back them up because of restrictions. What's their off-ramp? Surrender. They won't surrender with Putin in power. Their only off-ramp is not total destruction, but to lose the war, and to have all the restrictions, all of the negative consequences for the rest of the world coming down on them. There is no positive off-ramp for Vladimir Putin, even if he uses a tactical nuclear weapon, which actually would only make things worse. There's only one road for Russia in this, and that is to surrender or be defeated.
Surrender or be defeated. Well, actually, you mentioned those Russian missiles, cruise missiles, Iskanders, and other ones. So this week on Monday, Russians just tried to intimidate us with this massive missile attacks on our cities, on critical infrastructure, electricity stations, power stations, and other ones. It led to some blackouts, to some short-term cutoffs of the electricity in some regions, in some cities. And actually, we felt that it was painful, but still we stand on our ground and we keep fighting, and it just makes us more angrier and ready to fight actually. Well, how for you said few weeks, 2, 3 weeks. How long actually can Russia just to keep to sustain this level of pressure on Ukraine using missiles, this kind of tools of providing war and attacking our cities?
Well, even Western intelligence don't have accurate figures on the stockpile of conventional weapons that Russia has. But from the best estimates that I've read, 2 or 3 months, if they keep it up like this, that's at the outside. Personally, I don't believe they could keep it up that long. I believe by the end of the year, and we're already into almost mid-October. So we're talking a little over 2 months, perhaps, at this level. But I see this level start to go down every day. You're already seeing it. After the first day, the level of missiles that have been fired at Ukraine, although horrible, have decreased. You're going to see that continue to
Actually
decrease.
decreased in 3 times. On
Yes.
Monday, it was some 80 missiles. On Tuesday,
Yeah,
it
about
was
84.
30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if it's going to decrease 2 to 3 times every day, unknown. But it's going to decrease where by the end of the year, again, we're only talking a month or two, it's going to be very, very low. And cruise missiles, they're almost out, in my opinion. They're going to be firing whatever stockpiles they have left of long range Soviet missiles. And that's about it. They don't have a Black Sea fleet. Submarines, yes. But again, you need missiles to fire from a submarine. Otherwise, you just wave from offshore. So they don't have that capacity also. Their draft, their conscription is a joke. They're going to be losing tens of thousands of soldiers as they send them to the front untrained with very little weapons or ammunition. Some don't have shoes, no food, no medical supplies. It's going to be a very, very hard winter for the Russian army. It's going to be a hard winter for the Ukrainian army. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to shortchange this at all. But the Russians are going to suffer even worse than they have. And Putin is not one to back down. He escalates. He doesn't de-escalate. So until he's gone, literally, unless he's taken out either physically or politically, this will continue until the Russians have no missiles left to fire and the Russian army absolutely rebels en masse, which they may do not too long from now, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, yeah, this conscription and mobilization draft campaign, it was something to be expected from Putin, but for some time, from some few 4 or 5 months, he denied that he will start this campaign, mobilization campaign. He insisted that he doesn't need any mobilization, any additional forces in Russian army, that Russian army is very strong and it just keeps fighting successfully. But suddenly he changed his position, he changed his mind. Why did he change it? Actually, what was the reasons? Because the escalation is the only way for him, and he doesn't have any other resources to keep it on such a level of escalation.
I believe that the reason he did it was twofold. Somebody finally got to him and told him what a disaster the special military operation was in Ukraine, but also some of his biggest supporters, whether in the media or in the Kremlin or both, just were enraged, and they convinced him he has to do this or there's going to be some severe problems within Russia by the warmongers, the pro-war people in Russia. They actually wanted an increase in military operations within Ukraine. They did not want to scale down or to de-escalate or to negotiate or go to the peace table. They wanted the opposite. So I believe Putin felt that he had no choice. Even if he didn't want to, he had to escalate. And as you said, his resources are limited. He couldn't just launch full-scale missile attacks every day. So he had to do what he could, which is to use conscription, to use, as is said, cannon fodder, and to call it a partial military conscription with the caveat that he could call up 1 million, I think 1.2 million in the document that he signed, if he needs to, with 300,000 being the first round of conscription. And we can see how well the first round of conscription is going. I think more than, well, I've read recently over 700,000 Russians have left Russia since 21 September, the day the conscription first started.
Okay, well, some probably supporters of Russia would respond or argue with us, saying that it worked in the past. It worked in history, in Stalin's times, actually, when quantity of military was actually the same as the quality of military. Quantity was quality itself. You could conscript or call up to the army 1 million men, and they would just fight with Nazis, with Germans, with everyone, whoever, and have an advantage on the battlefield. What has changed from Stalin's times to Putin's times? What is the difference between those two wars, Second World War and the Soviets there and Russians right now?
Well, it would be easy for me to say the internet and social media. I'm not going to say that because that's certainly a big part of it. What's the difference? The supply chain, logistics. In Soviet times and until fairly recently, the Soviet army was geared towards war with the West. The Cold War. They were on a wartime footing, rather. Excuse me. Their factories, their munitions, their conscription, the training.
And I'm sorry, land lease from United States. So which
World War II. Well, if you want to talk World War II, they would perhaps be, well, they would be speaking German in Moscow today, for sure, because without the West, the land lease, which I've written about several times, they would have lost. There's no question about that. And of course, Russia doesn't talk about that, of course. But no, you're right. But between World War II and the end of the Soviet Union, they were on a wartime footing. And so they were able to supply their army, as bad as it was with the Soviet tactics that they still used. They were able to field a large army with the proper equipment, weapons, ammunition, training, tanks, aircraft, and so forth. That went away. That went away. They scaled that way back. They do not have the logistics, the supply chain, the factories, the trained cadre soldiers that they had during the Soviet Union. You cannot go from a peacetime army and a nation all the way to a wartime economy and a wartime military overnight. It takes months, perhaps years to do that. And the Russian economy was very bad before this invasion started. The answer, they just don't have the logistics. They cannot supply and field an army today. And I don't believe that they're going to be able to do that until they're finally defeated.
Okay, our time is running out, and I'm just afraid that Zoom will just cut us off. But I have one more question. One more question about American support of Ukraine. Well, actually, yeah, this war is the war between the sizes of resources, of course, economic resources, weaponry, human resources, and so on. And we get a lot of support from United States right now. This autumn is pretty complicated and hard for inner political situation in the United States. It's election time, actually. What still America can do for Ukraine this autumn till the end of this year, and what should it do to support Ukraine, and what it will actually do regarding all the circumstances that we have right now, elections, winter coming, and so on.
Well, the first part of your question is what should it do? It should do what, in my opinion, it should have done from the very beginning, which is to supply Ukraine with all of the weapons, ammunition, and training that it says it needs, that President Zelensky has said it needs from the very, very beginning. I believe this war would be over right now, or would certainly be in the end phase right now if Ukraine had all of the military equipment and training that it needs. So, to go further, so what we need to do now in the United States and the West is to finally take all the gloves off, to take all the restrictions off, and supply Ukraine with all the modern weapons, ammunition, and training that it needs to defeat Russia. Notice I said defeat, not to hold them at bay, not to keep them on the other side of the trenches or on the other side of a river. No, we need to supply you with all of the equipment and ammunition and training you need to defeat Russia. And we need to do that now, not next year, not next spring or next summer, right now. The final part of your question is, well, what will we do with the elections coming up? I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm very afraid in many ways, and I've written about this a lot. If the American Republican Party wins the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate next month, and our election's less than a month away, I believe that the support for Ukraine, both financially and militarily and emotionally, will decrease. They have said this publicly, the Republican Party. I take them at their word. We will see the support for Ukraine be slashed. This is a horrible thing and makes me very angry. Just one more thing. If in 2024, we have a presidential election coming up in 2 years, if the Republicans win that election, already having a Republican government in place, I believe whatever remaining support there is for Ukraine will be gone. And I hate to say this, but the Republican Party right now is not Ukraine's friend. I've written about this. I'm not ashamed to say it. And I think every Ukrainian should watch the American election next month very, very closely, because our two countries' futures are tied to this election.
Yeah, we will definitely look at your elections very attentively and very closely, and we will hope that everything will just go on in an optimistic way. Will be solved in an optimistic way actually. But your honest answer is very appreciated. I appreciate it so much, and thank you for those honest answers and for this very interesting conversation, Mr. Debatto. Thank you once more for finding time to communicate with us and with the Ukrainian audience. It was a pleasure and honor for me. Thank you once more.
Thank you.
And thank you, our dear audience. We hope to see you soon with our new guest. Bye-bye.